Okay, it says we have started. I'm going to assume that's true. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you are new. I am Cougar, and we are talking about topic: does planting trees control climate change? So this title is very deliberate on my part. This is me engaging in some of my own narrative warfare. But I hear this sort of thing all the time. I guess I gotta leave these glasses on. Sorry. I hear this sort of thing all the time on the interwebs, even documentaries, newscasts, talking heads, all kinds of things going on out there in disinformation land. And the question is usually, or the contention usually is, by planting trees you can control climate change or manage climate change or something like that. And the answer is no, you can't. Now I'm a biologist, and I'm not a curmudgeon, and I'm not after, I don't want to make people cry or give them, depression or anything like that. I'm just telling you the truth. Planting trees does not control climate change. Period. Now, that's the short answer. So if that's good enough for you, and you're willing to take that out into the world and argue with people who say we just need to plant more trees, fine. You have it from a biologist, a professional in the field, has told you that planting trees does not control climate change. Now, that's all I'm saying, by the way. If you want the long answer, and if you want to arm yourself with the knowledge necessary to really argue this point, or at least for your own part to understand this point so that people can't blow smoke up your butt, then you need to stay. And I will talk about why this doesn't work. So, where to start? So, like I said, this title is carefully crafted to both reflect what people often say or contend, and also to be wrong. This is crafted to be wrong. I can have a much longer title that contains more words and more descriptors and more caveats, but it wouldn't be a good title. It wouldn't be a good title for a YouTube video, and it wouldn't be a good title for a scientific paper or the headline in a newspaper. It would try and compress the real complexity of biology and the carbon cycle. It would try to compress the real complexity of the world into a few words, or maybe 1 or 2, 3 bullet points, which you can't do. I mean, you can do that if that's what you want to do. But if you're trying to hew as close to science as you can, then you can't do that. And people do this all the time. In fact, a couple of days ago, I skewered Johann Rockstrom in a reaction video, basically, hanging him out to dry for oversimplifying things. And also, I detected, and I think I commented extensively on this, he was pandering to his audience, who are not scientists. And so, they don't want to hear the complexity. Or maybe the complexity makes them sad. Or maybe the complexity is not the answer they want to hear. So if you want to craft a very simple headline, does planting control climate change, and you say yes, or we should, or you just want to turn that from a question into a statement. Planting trees will help us control climate change. You could say that. And most people on the planet would believe that. Planting trees will help us control climate change. But this is absolutely wrong. Almost every word in this sentence is wrong. Almost every word in a sentence, a declarative statement, planting trees will help us control climate change. Almost every word is incorrect in that sentence. And let me explain why. So first of all, just going to the title of this video, the words climate change and the word preceding that, control, do not ever belong in the same sentence. Ever. We're not controlling fuck all. Okay? Did you get that? We're not controlling anything. This system is completely out of control, and it was never in our control. If you want to focus on humans, if you want to focus on some deity or some Greek goddess or whatever else, I guess maybe you can get away with that. But we, as humans, we've never been in control of any of this. So this whole, and you hear this so much in modern media all the time, it just blows my gasket. We must control climate change. We must control the Earth system. We must You're not. What? No. No, 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 no. And then there's a whole other bunch of people who will say, we are such a small species and the earth is so big. How can we possibly imagine we have any control? See, that's the denialists. They just don't want to ever hear. That's something we did. Digging up fossil fuels and setting them on fire changed the earth system. They want to pretend that we have no control of the earth system. So that's that group. And there's another group on the opposite end of the spectrum saying, oh, we have total control. But both of these people have an agenda. Both of these groups of people have an agenda. And they're blowing smoke up your butt. We have no control. We never had control. And in the case of, oh, we're burning fossil fuels and that's changing the system. Yes, you can change the system. You can really screw it up. But that doesn't mean you have control over it. Because for one thing, you don't even know what the system is. You have no parameterization. You haven't studied it. You don't know how it works. You've got modelers and you've got forecasting and you've got some other things. But you don't have any idea how it works. You're not going to turn this knob over here and pull that lever over there and control the system. You're not doing that. Now, there have been people who in the past have talked about controlling things like weather, controlling the weather. And there are, tinfoil hat conspiracists who say that we do control the weather, that it's HARP and it's your space lasers and everything else. They think we control chemtrails, that we control the weather. And we're controlling the weather to harm people with the weather, using the weather as a weapon. No, we don't control the weather. We don't control anything. The weather, the climate system, the earth system, these things are massive. And the only time that anybody ever talked seriously about controlling the weather was when they talked about using nuclear weapons in the atmosphere to influence, not control, to influence atmospheric phenomena like tornadoes and hurricanes and some other things. Using a nuclear weapon to blow a hurricane to pieces. That's not control. That's destruction. But that's the only time they ever talked about using technology to influence the weather. Yes, using nuclear weapons to blow hurricanes to pieces. I mean, I don't think they came up with a actual mechanism in science that would really do that. Hurricanes are enormous. Hurricanes are, 100 miles across. And what part of that are you going to disrupt with a nuclear weapon? I mean, good luck. In fact, a nuclear weapon, through the heat involved in the discharge of the destruction of the weapon, would cause additional convection. And convection is what makes hurricanes so dangerous. So, no, you're not. What? What are you talking about? We're not controlling the weather. And you can have your conspiracies and you can have fun with that. It can be your hobby and you can, have pins and all this string pointing to all these, conspiracists. And it doesn't matter. That's not happening. We're not controlling the weather. And so back to the topic of the thing. Does planting trees control climate change? No. Because nothing controls climate change. And yet they will say that. And why do they say that? Why do they say that? I mean, that's a dumb thing to say. Controlling climate change? You're going to control climate change by doing anything? Anything at all? Nuclear weapons? What are you talking about? You're going to control climate change. How can you control this system? You can poke at it and influence it. You can, over 300 years, you could shove it in one particular direction, like heating. But can you control it? Now that you spent 300 years causing it to be heated, can you control any of that? No, but they have to say that. They have to say that. Because in the background of people's minds these days, the system, the earth dynamic system, is out of control. We never had control. But that's how we talk about shit. It's out of control. And that's what people on the street say, man, the weather's out of control. You never had control, you stupid chimp. This is your narrative. This is based upon some godlike powers you think you have. You got nothing. You have nothing. There has never been anything. Not even God, real gods, did not control any of this. And for someone to come along and say, well, it's out of control. It was never in control. This is the wrong narrative. The word control does not belong in any sentence having to do with this topic. Nowhere does that word belong in there. If you don't like what's happening, then I guess you could say, wow, we've really fucked affect up the weather. We've got some bad things coming. You can say that kind of thing. You can forecast that it's going to get really ugly and really bad really quickly. You could forecast that it's going to become unsurvivable, because that's what's going to happen. But you can't pretend that we've lost control and we must regain control, because you never had control. That's bullshit. You never had any control over any of this. And just because you think you know how it works, and you think technology is so great, and you have a religion that says that there's a guy in the sky who throws lightning bolts at you, and you could, pray to him and he'll stop throwing lightning bolts and hail at you, and you think you've got control, you don't. So whenever anybody talking about the climate, the weather, global heating, global warming, global climate change, is talking about, we got to control the system. The system's out of control. You should just discount everything they say after that, because they've already lied to you, and they've already engaged in a kind of narrative warfare that they can now take wherever they want to take it. There is no control. We didn't lose control. The system is not out of control. Therefore, can you plant trees to control the climate? No. Short answer. No. Because you can't control the climate. And then, even the terms climate change don't belong in this sentence. What kind of climate change are you expecting? Is planting trees going to help you with that? What if you live in an area that's really hot? Does planting trees help you with the heat? Well, it can help you with the heat if it's really hot in your city and the sidewalks are hot, and you want to plant street trees to shade the sidewalk. Then you could make a claim that planting trees will cool the sidewalk. But that's not climate change. And that's not global heating. You just want some relief from the heat when you're walking down the sidewalk. So plant all the trees you can and all the trees you want to shade the sidewalk for when you're walking on the sidewalk. But as for, climate change, I don't know. What's your problem that you expect to have? What's your forecast, and how are trees supposed to help you with that? Trees can provide cooling for the exact space where they're planted if you're standing under it. I mean, that's a lot of caveats, right? It can cool you standing under the tree where you planted it and where you happen to be. Oh, and trees can provide food. Not a bad thing. If you're worried that climate change is going to deprive you of food, then planting trees, including entire orchards of them, may provide you with fruits, nuts. What else do you get from trees? Wood, right? And, maybe that's a good thing. So maybe plant a tree to help you, or in a whole orchard, and maybe an entire forest. You plant all these things because you need the services. But that's not controlling climate change. You're planting trees because you want the things that trees will give to you, and you want them in your neighborhood. Maybe even want them in your backyard. You want more trees for food. You want more trees for wood. So plant trees for those things that trees provide, including you can just plant trees because they're pretty. Flowers, whatever, or they're habitat for animals and other types of organisms. So you can plant trees for lots of reasons, but not to control climate change. Definitely plant trees. But don't let someone tell you that we're planting trees to control climate change. And you may say, well, it's harmless, but it isn't. It's actually evil. It is absolutely foursquare completely evil to say that you're going to plant trees to control climate change. Because what that implies is you don't have to do anything else to avoid climate change. Or as I like to prefer to call it, global heating, because that's the actual physics behind climate change. The reason why they want you to think about planting trees is because then they don't have to talk about the 800-pound gorilla that's sitting in the middle of the room, which is fossil fuels. And when you see someone or hear someone talking about, oh, well, we're just going to plant a lot of trees everywhere, all places, all the time, 24/7. then what they're not wanting to talk about is we have to stop burning fossil fuels. And they could even be working for the fossil fuel energy industry. They could be, because that's what they talk about all the time. They're always talking about planting trees. And they do all these beautiful ads showing children with tiny little shovels, planting trees. And it's so lovely. And Mother Nature and children and dogs and cats and all this kind of stuff. And it's all bullshit. It's propaganda. They want you to keep burning fossil fuels. And if you have any anxiety about that shit, because it might be changing the Earth's dynamic system, maybe it's going to kill everybody. If you have any anxiety about that, go plant a tree. That's their therapy. That's their move to get you to go plant a tree, or at least to think about planting a tree, or to donate money to some other company that's going to plant a tree for you, or so they say. Planting trees as therapy. Planting trees as a way to discharge your guilt. Planting trees as a way to deal with your cognitive dissonance, that you're just about to go fill up the car with more gasoline so you can drive to Starbucks to get a latte at the drive-in. If that causes you any anxiety and you have any cognitive dissonance about that, then all you have to do is donate $1 to some company that will plant a tree for you, or so they say. Or they'll just keep the $1, because it's not about the tree. Even they know it's not about the tree. It's about you feeling good about your fucked up way of life. And if you're willing to donate $1 or 10 to them, then they'll plant a tree for you. And it's all just a lie. They're not planting any fucking trees. They're taking the $10 and saying, well, that person feels great. And that's our actual service. Our actual service is mental wellness, and not really planting trees. We'll plant a tree once in a while and catch it on film and videotape the whole thing. And then we'll brag about how many trees we planted today. We planted 10 trees today. And the other 364 days of the year we did fuck all. But we took the money. Because our real service here is not planting trees. Our actual service is therapy. Send us $10 and you'll feel better. It's like going to church. And you were a sinner all week, and one day of the week you go to church and you put 50 cents in the donation tray as it comes around, and you feel great. And you probably promise yourself you're not going to sin next week, and then you sin anyway. And so you go back to church and you have 50 cents and you put it in the tray as it goes around the pews, and you feel great. It's therapy. It's therapy. You're sacrificing money. Of course, it's 50 cents. It's not even a cup of coffee. You're sacrificing money. You're giving money to the church, and it's not even much money. Maybe you give a nickel. It doesn't even matter how much it is, right? You think that the worst sinners would give more money for more therapy, but it doesn't matter how much you give. You give a nickel. The worst sinners probably do give a nickel because they don't really give a shit, and they're just giving the nickel for the therapy, and they're hoping God notices that they gave money, but not how much, because they don't care. It's just therapy. It just gives them an excuse to sin next week, because they know they can come in and give a nickel, 50 cents if they're feeling really generous, and they'll feel great. And they'll walk out of there feeling wonderful about themselves. And so that's what this is. And the airline industry, which is dependent on people flying, which means burning jet fuel, right? They actually have programs now where at the time you buy your ticket, you can check a box. How much work is that, right? You can check a fucking box. Check. Please plant a tree for my miles, right? I'm buying a ticket. I'm going to fly 500 miles, and phew, I feel terrible about that. But you know what? I'll check this box, and they'll donate $5 to some company that promises to plant a tree in my name. They'll probably put a little tag on it with my name on it, so that everybody who walks by can see that Joe Blow planted a tree when he bought his airline ticket. But none of that's going to happen because it doesn't need to. Because the whole point of the checkbox is the fucking checkbox, that you can check the box and feel good about buying the ticket. And you never follow up on that. You just donate the $5 or the $10 or the $50 or whatever they think they can get out of you because of the guilt that you're feeling, because you're willing to look at that checkbox. Most people don't, but you did. And so if you're looking at the checkbox and wondering, maybe I should check that checkbox because, man, I'm feeling kind of shitty about flying all the way across the country just to go to a fucking wedding, for someone who's already been married twice, and I'm feeling kind of bad about this. So I guess I'll check the checkbox and pay the $20. And then when I get to the wedding, I'll ask my brother-in-law, hey, could you give me $20 because I had to check a checkbox to come to your stupid third wedding. Or maybe there's a great buffet and there's free wine and cheese, and so it'll be okay, right? You have a great day and you get to be with your family and you eat the wine and the cheese, and it was worth the $20 with the checkbox. And that's what this is all about. They'll promise to plant a tree because they can't promise to remove CO2 from the atmosphere on your behalf. If they could do that, that would be the checkbox. Check this checkbox and we'll remove all the CO2 associated with your trip to the East Coast to go to a wedding for someone who's been married twice already. But they can't do that because they don't have any way to remove CO2 on your behalf. And then you say, ha ha, you must not be a real scientist because every child knows from the 5th grade that trees remove CO2 from the atmosphere. The title of this video is, Does Planting Trees Control Climate Change? No, it doesn't. Have you seen a tree when they first plant it? It's this big. How much carbon is in that tree from when it sprouted from a seed, which was this big, all right? How much carbon is in that tree? 4 or 5 ounces? When you fly across the country in a jet aircraft that burns, I don't know, 50,000 pounds of fuel, some part of that fuel is yours. Some of those atoms coming out of the back of that tree have your name on it. And how many times have you flown? And how many times have you been on airplanes? And how many times have you gone places where you didn't need to go? So, how many trees would you really have to plant to make up for all the CO2 you're going to emit on that trip? It's not one. What is it, 100? Is it 200 trees they would have to plant, put in the ground? You know, each one transferring 4 ounces of carbon in your name. Is that what they're promising to do? Well, they're not promising to do anything. And then you say, oh, wait, it's not the planting of the tree. But that is the title. Does planting trees control climate change? And the answer is it doesn't. It can't. They're too small. There's not enough carbon in that tree you just planted, grown from a seed, to make any difference of any kind. Okay, well, that's not what we mean. We don't mean actual planting trees, sticking them in the ground. Stop being so pedantic. But that's what people say. People say, if you're worried about your carbon emissions, plant a tree. That's what they say. Because what they want to avoid is the prospect that now you have to grow a tree. The actual message is plant a tree. Put a seed in the ground. Put a nut in the ground. Whatever. Plant a tree. And that will absolve you of all guilt. Plant a tree. Because they know no one's going to stand around and water that tree and keep the bugs from eating it and keep the squirrels from eating it, digging it up. No one's going to be there when the drought comes and that tree withers and dies. No one's going to take care of that tree. If they plant a tree at all, which they won't because it costs money and that tree's going to die anyway, if they plant a tree at all, who's going to be there to manage the tree? Not you. And probably not the person that planted it either. They're just not going to do that because it costs money and it takes time. So if you're going to make the case that, well, it starts by planting a tree and then the tree gets big and it absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere. I have the diagram right here on the page. And you're looking at it, the carbon cycle and the photosynthesis, and the tree grows from a little tree to a big tree and it absorbs carbon. And the fate of most planted trees is they die. They die within a month or two. Because probably, and watch how this works, probably the place where they plant the tree has no trees. Why do I know it has no trees? Because if it had trees, you couldn't plant a tree there. You see? So where are you planting trees? You're planting trees in places where there are no trees. I mean, that's kind of given, isn't it? You're planting trees where there are no trees. So why are there no trees? There's no trees there now, and that's why you're planting a tree. You're planting a tree where there's no trees. And you're thinking, oh, I just planted a tree. You come back 3 months later, that tree is gone. Why were there no trees? Well, the reason, though your tree is gone, your new tree is gone, is also the reason why there are no trees there. You could go back there every couple of months and plant more trees if you wanted to, and you come back and they're all gone. Why are they gone? Because the place you're planting trees is not tree habitat, as evidenced by the fact that there are no trees there. And that's why you're planting trees, because there are no trees. But it's not tree habitat. You see how this works? You see how it is? You're planting trees where there's no trees. But that right away should set off alarm bells. You're planting trees where there are no trees, because that's the only place you can plant trees. That's how that works. And that's why that doesn't work. You can't plant trees where there are no trees, although that's what you think you have to do. Biology knows how shit works. You're the one that doesn't know how shit works. If there are no trees and there are only grasses, then there's a reason for that. Maybe there's not enough rainfall. Maybe there's too much fire. Maybe there's some animal in the landscape that you can't even see that simply eats little trees, eats them. Horses and cows will do that. Goats will do that. If you're planting a tree in a pasture or on some place where people run goats and cattle, you might come back later and it's been bitten off to the ground. Some domesticated animal came by and ate it, and that's why there are no trees. In fact, when I was still getting my graduate degree, we had a discussion about how the oak trees, the native oak trees in the California foothills, are going to go extinct. And the reason why they're going to go extinct is because they can't recruit. That's a term that means basically that the acorns that drop find suitable habitat. That's a big if. They sprout. They get big. Also a big if. And there's no animal that comes along to eat them. And then they get big enough when their trunks are 6 inches around or so, where they can survive most things. They've had time to put their roots down where the water might be. They're big enough not to be eaten by some jackrabbit. And plus, if the goats and the sheep and the cows and the horses show up, they're also too big to be molested by large animals. But in the California foothills, there is so much mixed land use, kind of a euphemism for running your horses and cattle and goats and sheep for free on public land, mixed land used, that there is no recruitment. The acorns fall in the grass, and the grass isn't even supposed to be there. It's an introduced oats and sometimes thistle. And so the acorns fall to the ground. They don't find suitable habitat because they're down in the shade. But let's say they find a spot where they can germinate. They pop up. And in the spring, when everything is green, and this little plant is also green, putting on tiny leaves, hoping that it can grow up, some cow comes along munching the grass and just munches the oak. And if you go out into the foothills in California and you look for the baby oak trees, which is the kind of goofy shit that biologists do, okay? You start looking for baby oak trees. You see all these big oak trees spreading their branches majestically, and the ground is covered in acorns, and you're thinking, wow, this oak grove is doing great. Look at these big majestic trees and all this acorns thick on the ground, and you don't see any babies. You don't see any baby trees. And you say, oh, maybe it's not doing so good because there's no recruitment. And when these big old trees die, get hit by lightning or a fire comes along and burns their bark or whatever, then, there's not going to be any oak trees because there's no recruitment. And when that oak tree catches fire or bugs eat it or whatever, it falls over, lightning falls over, and whatever has been keeping the recruitment to a minimum, to zero, will continue, and the current acorn crop will rot or be eaten by herbivores, and then the oak trees are gone. And that's their fear, that the recruitment of little oak trees is so poor that the foothill oak trees are going extinct in the foothills. They won't go. They're not going extinct. I have to be careful when I use the words here. They are being extirpated. Extirpation is a kind of extinction for a region. Okay. And the regions we're talking about are places that are mixed use. They are dominated by herbivores, big, important, financially valuable herbivores like horses and cows and sheep and goats and whatever, that roam these hillsides eating the spring grasses. And because of that, then these areas can't have oak trees. So yeah, you could plant an oak tree if you wanted to. You could go up here in the hills and take a bunch of those acorns off the ground and say, look at all these acorns. Why aren't there any baby oak trees? And you could take a stick and make a hole, put the acorn in, make another hole, put the acorn in. And you think, wow, I did an important thing today. I helped all these acorns get into the ground and they will be baby oak trees. And you come back 10 years later and there's still no baby oak trees because you didn't understand. You just had no idea what was going on. Now, biologists know what's going on. Biologists know all about that shit. We're up there in the hills all the time. We're saying, where are the baby oak trees? Oh, well, here's some baby oak trees that have been bitten off of the ground. I wonder what did that. I don't know. Oh, look at that herd of cattle over there. I wonder. And then they don't wonder anymore. They know what's happening to the baby oak trees. So, can you plant an oak tree and control climate change? You can't even plant a fucking oak tree and be successful. It won't go anywhere. It won't do anything. It will die. You have to find a place where you can plant trees where trees can grow. And a place that doesn't have trees is probably not the place to plant trees. And you don't understand that, and no one understands that, because it seems obvious that if you want to plant trees, you have to go someplace where you don't have trees but would like to have some. And then you start planting trees willy-nilly, and you come back later and they're all dead. Because you planted a tree where trees can't grow. And that's why there were no trees there when you showed up in the first place. Because it's not tree habitat. And so this idea that we're just going to plant trees, we're just going to find, open meadows and open pastures, and we're going to plant all these trees. No, you're not. Oh, yes, you will. You'll plant the trees. But that's not going to do any good. That's not going to do you any good. The trees aren't going to make it. And that's why I have in the title, does planting trees control climate change? No. Doesn't mean we don't need trees, but planting trees doesn't do fuck all. Unless you're a biologist, an arborist, and you know about trees, and you understand the habitat, and you understand the stressors and the threats to trees, and you go there and you examine the area, and you profile the soil, and you profile the temperature regimes and the rainfall regimes, and you figure all this shit out because you're looking at an open field or a pasture or something, and you say, I'm going to fill this full of trees, and someone else is tapping you on the shoulder saying, no, the fuck you're not. There are no trees here. You're saying, yes, that makes it the perfect place to plant trees. No, that makes it the worst place to plant trees. Why are there no trees here? Oh, stop asking difficult questions. I'm a biologist. I'm an arborist. I'm asking the fucking questions. Why are there no trees here? Well, we're just going to plant trees. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, if you want to feel good about your lifestyle choices and you want to just plant trees and never worry about the actual adult trees, well, then I guess you can plant all the fucking trees you want. But I'm an arborist and I'm a biologist and I'm here to make forests. That's what I'm here to do. And I don't think you can make a forest here because there is, let me look. Nope, no forest. And so that causes a problem, doesn't it? Wait. So what you're trying to tell me is that I can only plant trees where there's already trees. If you want them to be successful, yeah. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would I plant a tree here if there's already a tree? Good question. I think you're planting a tree because you want to feel good about your lifestyle choices. Because someone gave you, $20 when they checked the box on the fucking plane ticket to go to the wedding for someone who's already had two, and they wanted to feel good about that, and they checked the box, and you got $20, and now you're out here in this pasture where the cows run trying to plant a tree. It doesn't work like that. None of this shit works like that. It just doesn't work like that. Biology says that shit doesn't work. So then you come back and you say, okay, fine. You're right. Here we are planting trees where there are no trees. That's dumb. But maybe I can, what about this? I go to a place where people have cut down all the trees for whatever reason, and I plant trees there. I mean, there were trees there. That's why they cut them down for whatever reason. Or maybe it's just a forest. It just burned down by itself. Okay? It just burned down by itself. So we'll just come in here, we'll plant more trees. Is there anything wrong with that? Well, no, there's nothing wrong with it. First of all, be very careful about this. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with planting trees. Plant all the trees you want. Plant more trees. I'm a biologist. Please. Trees. More trees. Street trees. Backyard trees. Front yard trees. The more of them that have food, the better, right? Nut trees. Fruit trees. Apple trees. Everything. Trees everywhere. Best if they have food. And even if the food isn't human edible, food for other animals, right? Plant walnut trees. The squirrel loves the walnuts. Yay, we're going to plant walnut trees for the squirrels. And maybe we'll eat the walnuts too, but mostly we're doing it for the squirrels because yay, squirrels. So plant trees everywhere. I'm saying plant trees. But this narrative that you're going to solve your climate problem by planting trees is bullshit. It's just bullshit. Now, let's say you go to a place where they cut down all the trees. Number one, if we're going to be planting trees, we have to get other people to stop cutting them down. Right? Am I right? Because you're going to plant your tree and they're just going to cut it down. because that's what they're doing there. The reason you're planting trees is because someone else came along earlier and cut them all down. And if you find habitat suitable for trees, I mean, here's the tree stumps. Here's the stumps. Look, someone cut them all down. Wow, well, we got to fix that. Then all you're really doing at that point is you're replacing the trees that some other person, some other human, for economic reasons, cut down that tree. That tree, when cut down, released all of its CO2 into the atmosphere, and you're going to plant a new tree to take that CO2 back out of the atmosphere. You're just going to replace one tree with another. Even if it takes 40 years, I mean, in theory, it'll work. And of course, planting the tree doesn't solve that problem. You cut down a 80-year-old tree, and now you have a baby tree in the ground. Sorry, conservation of matter doesn't balance, all right? But maybe in 80 years, that baby tree will replace that tree, and you'll pull the CO2 out of the atmosphere that was released when you destroyed the earlier adult tree. But that's all you're doing. You're just undoing a wrong that someone else did, not you. You checked the box to fly across the country on an airplane. That CO2 is still in the atmosphere, because all you're going to do by planting a tree where there are trees is you're going to replace the tree that was cut down. Why did they cut that tree down? I don't know. Making wood, making firewood, burning it. They're doing something with it. It's gone. And once it's gone, it makes its way into the atmosphere, and it might take 10 years. It might even take 20, but it doesn't matter. All that CO2 is going back in the atmosphere, and that's a long-term problem. That's that's a 1,000-year problem, and you're going to plant a tree, and in 80 years, you're going to correct that problem. Fair enough. If it takes 80 years, that's what it takes, and you're going to correct that problem. But you're just correcting the tree that got cut down. You're not correcting anything else, right? By planting trees where trees were, you replace a forest. But the forest was already there. You're just replacing a forest that somebody else destroyed. And the forest is returned. And that's it. You remove the CO2 that was put in the atmosphere by destroying the forest in the first case, and then you're bringing it back down into a new forest. And that's it. That's all you've done. The idea that you're going to plant trees, okay, if you want to use forests to remove CO2, which, by the way, doesn't control climate change. But let's just say that's a goal, a stated goal. It's very carefully stated. We are going to increase forests and or repair forests to remove CO2 from the atmosphere that is put there by humans, not by cutting down one tree and replacing it with another later, but by humans digging up fossil fuels. Then what you need to expand your forests. Replacing one tree with one tree is just solving the problem of a tree got lost, and now you replaced it. So, golf clap. All right. If you want to actually remove the CO2 that's in the atmosphere from fossil fuels, then you need to grow your forests. That's what you need to do. So it's not planting trees to control climate change. It's enlarging forests to remove fossil fuel-based CO2 from the atmosphere. The forests must get bigger. I can't talk. The forests must get bigger. There is currently nowhere on Earth where forests are getting bigger, except that one type of forest is replacing another. Or that forests are growing into areas that used to be inhospitable to trees because it was so cold. And the forests are growing into the formerly cold areas because the areas are warming due to global heating. So this is forest succession. So the forest will grow into new habitat because the habitat isn't as frozen. It's hard to establish forests in places where the ground is frozen. We're talking far to the north, right? And the south doesn't really count because there's not enough land down there to really matter. We're talking far to the north, way up above the Arctic Circle, where the ground is frozen all the time. It's called permafrost. But with global heating, the permafrost melts. It thaws, right? So now it's just mushy dirt. And mushy dirt, well, you can put a seed in it, and a little tree can come up, and its little roots don't freeze, and you can have forest succession. You go from a kind of a barren, scrubby permafrost to a lush forest, and your forest is expanding into what used to be permafrost. Well, what's the problem with that? Of course, if you're paying any attention to the Earth system dynamics and the changes we're making, the melting of the permafrost is an absolute disaster. The methane and CO2 and nitrous oxide releases that come with thawing the permafrost are completely lethal for civilization. We are destroying ourselves by melting the permafrost and the amount of methane that's going to be released. And as the forest expands into that, yes, it will remove some of the CO2 from the atmosphere. But the trade-off is you're melting the permafrost. You're getting some forest succession into these areas that used to be inhospitable, but you're getting permafrost destruction. And how do those even start to balance? I don't know. I doubt it. And the forest expansion into new habitat, meaning there were no trees here before. There was just frozen ground. Forest expansion into new habitat like that is really slow. The changes we're making to the Earth system right now are happening very rapidly. So it's unlikely that the amount of CO2 being pulled out of the atmosphere by forests expanding into newly available habitat for trees is going to keep pace with the amount of changes we're making to the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels and by melting the permafrost. I don't think it balances out at all. Sure, maybe given 100 years, maybe given 500, maybe given 1,000 years, it'll balance out. But do we really have that long? Because we're burning fossil fuels. And we can burn fossil fuels like crazy at a rate that it just boggles the mind. Remember the number? 100 million barrels of crude oil daily. 100 million barrels, which is 40 gallons. 100 million. A million is a big number, people. 100 million barrels of crude oil, just the crude oil, every single day. Daily. OMG. Right? That's an OMG WTF moment. WTF. If you're not going, we're fucked. 100 million barrels of oil a day of crude oil, well, then we are clearly fucked. If you're not having that reaction, then you're just not paying attention. Start paying attention. And there is no chance, zero chance of any kind of forest expansion offsetting anything but a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that. Forests don't grow daily. The amount of change in forest size and depth, we don't count it on a daily basis. We count it on a decadal basis or multiple decades. You go back to the same forest and you look at it, and you look at it, and you look at it, and you'll spend your entire career, 30, 40-year career as an arborist studying some forest someplace. And you won't see any meaningful changes. You could be a biologist studying the permafrost, and you could spend your entire career studying the permafrost, and finally notice one day towards the end of your career as you're beginning to retire, notice some baby trees, actual trees coming up in a place that used to be frozen. You'll say, oh, look, we're getting some forest succession. That's interesting, and there's the real forest over there, and now there's some baby trees out here. And after 40 years of me studying this permafrost, that forest has now moved, a quarter mile, a tenth of a mile? It's still baby trees, of course, but here they are, right? I'm looking at these baby trees. Wow. How do these seeds get all the way out here? That's amazing. And, the forest is over there. And someday soon, 100, maybe 500 years from now, the forest will be where I'm standing right now. It's an amazing thing to watch. Amazing way to end your career as an arborist, okay? As a biologist. And you're saying, wow, that's amazing. We're getting some forest succession. The permafrost is melting. Oh, that's right. The permafrost is melting. Well, I guess we're still fucked. But as a biologist, it's really fascinating. I'm seeing all these baby trees show up. And the old forest is over there. And now there's a baby trees right here. It's like, wow, that's amazing. It's a factoid. You can know that it's happening. And then you retire, and no one ever comes back to that site. And the forest, it grows over thousands of years, and it eventually pulls some CO2 out of the atmosphere because forest growth will do that. And then there's another biologist, however, far, far from where you're standing. They're on the southern edge of that same forest, and and this is why forest expansion due to climate change is not really going to help us. There's another biologist. Standing at the other end of that forest. So there's a northern edge of a boreal forest, a northern forest, and there's a southern edge. And the southern edge is down where it's warmer. Okay, it's always been suitable tree habitat. So they're down in the south edge of that same forest where the trees are, oh no, the trees are dying. And why are the trees dying? Because it's getting hot. And this habitat, this supports the southern edge of this forest, is drying out. And there's bark beetles, and there's land use changes. And there's, as with the oak trees, there's all this mixed use. And there's all these grazing animals that are just killing the baby trees. And so as the adult trees succumb to climate change and global heating, there are no baby trees to replace them. And so at the same time that your northern margin of this boreal forest is moving northwards with the thawing of the permafrost, the southern edge is retreating northwards in the same direction because of the effects of heat. So what's really happening is your forest isn't getting larger. It's growing on the north and shrinking on the south. And this is happening all the time. Happening all the time right now. This is completely inevitable that this would happen. And so it's growing on the north and retracting on the east. And so what the boreal forest is really doing is it's not getting bigger. It's migrating. It's migrating north. And that's exactly what you would expect. The growth zone for the boreal forest is determined by a combination of annual temperatures, annual averages, rainfall, pests. And as the Earth system warms, then the area that the boreal forest would like to grow in moves north. It's too hot to the south. And the system, the growth area of the boreal forest moves north. And so the forest moves north. That doesn't mean that it sprouts legs and it starts migrating northward like some sort of a bird. But it finds new habitat in the north and expands north. It loses habitat in the south and dies off. And if you watched it from space over the course of 100 or 500 or 1,000 years, you'll just see it. It's just moving north like this. So it's not growing. It's migrating. It's moving. Not really. It doesn't have legs. It doesn't have wings. It doesn't have anything like that. It's moving as viewed from space, because it's growing to the north, it's expanding its range to the north with the melting of the permafrost, thank you, and it's shrinking in the south. So it's growing in one place, and one person will say, oh great, this forest is growing, and some person studying the exact same forest in the south will say, oh no, tear my hair, the forest is shrinking. And if you happen to talk to those same two people in a bar one night drinking beer, what you're all going to realize is, oh, it's moving. It's not growing. It's not really shrinking. It's moving. It's heading north. One baby plant at a time. And if that doesn't make any sense, because forests don't move, well, excuse me, biology is complicated. And that's why the short answer is no. Planting trees does not control climate change. And the long answer is planting trees does not control climate change, and it's a lot of answer, okay? It's complicated. This shit is complicated. And do you think the talking head on the evening news who says, hey, there's a new check box when you buy a plane ticket. Check this box and they'll plant a tree for you. Do you think that person understands anything of what I'm saying? No, they don't. They don't need to, because they're selling a product. They're liars and frauds and morons and nimrods and chimps. And it's fine. It works. That's what it takes to make money. You can't look at things very carefully. You just have to think, how can I make money? How can I sell this shit? How can I move shit? How can I move this product? How can I fill these planes with passengers? Some of them are getting nervous about climate change. But hey, here's an idea. Let's provide a checkbox that they can check to give us $20 more, and that they can check and they can feel good about it. And then we fill the planes with passengers, because the ones who don't give a shit don't check the box and keep the $20. And the ones that are wringing their hands and feeling bad and fretting about their contributions to global climate change, they check the box and they feel great. We fill the plane. Everyone's on the plane and everyone's happy. Some people are happy because they kept the $20. And some people are happy because they spent the $20. But in the end, they're all happy. And the plane is full. And it works. But does planting trees control climate change? No. But it doesn't need to. It needs to make people feel good. That's all it has to do. And it does that. Because people don't care. People don't look. People don't understand. It's biology. It's complicated. It's complicated. What can I say? It's complicated. I don't expect you to know. I don't expect you to understand. You don't have a master's degree in biology. But no, it makes no difference of any kind. Now, if you really, 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 truly, truly wanted to expand the forests in all directions, not just the directions where they want to go, but in all directions, then you would have to take land that is suitable for trees, but does not have trees on it because it's being used for something else, like, I don't know, agriculture. That there's farmers out there. And the reason why there are no trees in their fields is because they poison them. And you'd have to tell the farmers, sorry, you can't have farming here anymore. Because right over there on that ridge, you see that forest? That forest used to extend through your land and all the way to the south, another 200 miles. And we need those trees back. And so you have to abandon this land that you think is yours, but it really belongs to the earth, really belongs to the trees, and we're going to take it from you and we're going to give it back to the trees. And we're going to come out here and we're going to plant the trees. And we know this is suitable habitat for the trees because it used to be trees. And you cut all the trees down to have the dirt to put crops in. And so we're going to take away the crops and we're going to put the trees back. And we're going to grow the forest back to where it was. Now, please note, all you're really doing is removing the CO2 that was released into the atmosphere from the trees when they were cut down by the farmers 100 years ago. So you're not really net accomplishing anything. But you could do that. You could say, we are so desperate that we need to remove CO2 from the atmosphere as quickly as possible by any means possible and every means possible. And the one that is both the cheapest and has the most bang for the buck is to simply take farmland that is being used by farmers and remove that use and replant the trees and bring back the animals and bring back the everything. And then of course, you have to irrigate those trees. You have to fertilize them. You have to protect them from storms and from animals. And when a tree gets cut off at the bottom by a rabbit, you have to come in and put another tree. So that means there's arborists out there constantly watching the forest as it grows. I mean, that's their whole life now, right? They live in the forest. They live in the forest and they're paid to live there and they're brought food and water and all the things that you need as a human being. And that's their habitat. They live in the forest. And anytime a little plant dies or is cut off at the ground by a goat or a rabbit, they put a new plant right back in there. And they make a note and they make, they say, this is what I planted 20 trees today because 20 of our seedlings died or 20 of our seedlings were eaten by animals. And that would be their job. That's what you have to do. You have to create a whole new industry of just growing forests, not planting trees, mind you. I mean, that's how you start growing a forest. But creating a forest from scratch is a full-time job. You don't just plant a tree, take your $20 and walk away. Someone has to be there to make sure that tree grows. And when it doesn't, to replace it with another one. Because you're not growing trees, you're growing a forest. A forest. Because that's what you lost. A forest, not a tree. A forest. And you need a forester in your fucking forest to grow the trees to make the forest. That's what you have to do. Nobody on earth is doing that. Nobody on earth will ever do that. They won't do that. They'll give you a checkbox at the time you purchase your plane ticket, and you can check the box or not, and that's what they will do for you. That's the extent of what they will do for you. And they're really doing it for who? For themselves, because they got to fill that airplane. And that's how this shit works now. You're not planting trees. That's not it. That's not good enough. That doesn't come close. You have to grow forests. And that means you have to take the land. Take the land. And when you go to that farmer and you say, yeah, we're going to grow the forest back here. We need your land. Get lost. Well, they're going to go to their politicians and they're going to say they're taking my land. And what's the politician going to say? Well, they have the right to do that. We did designate this as a forest regrowth program, but you can't take my land. It's mine. No, your land actually belongs to the state. You just have title. Yeah, but that's not fair. But that's how we're doing this shit. But I don't gain anything from you doing your stupid shit with your forest. But the planet does, and the humans do. But I don't care about the humans. I care about my bank account. We don't care about your bank account. We want the forest back. But I don't care about your fucking forest. I want my land. It's not your land. It belongs to the state. And the state says we're going to grow a forest here. And that guy goes home, gets his AR-15, comes back to the courthouse and shoots everybody. Because that's how you do it. You see? And this is why we can't have nice things. Plant all the trees you want to. Go ahead, plant a tree. Fine. We need more trees. Plant street trees. See if your city will even let you do that. See if the city will let anyone plant a tree over the sidewalk. Do you know how many problems there are with planting trees over sidewalks? Well, for one thing, if the roots might someday buckle the sidewalk, and that's money to replace the sidewalk, and also the fruits fall, the nuts or the whatever fall from the tree and create trip hazards for people, and that's money, right? And also, you know, the trees drop branches and take down the utility lines, right? You know, the internet and the electricity and whatever else, and that costs money. And then, you know, of course, when the tree gets old or it gets diseased, then the arborist has to come out and bring a crew and cut down the tree and chip the tree up and plant a new tree, and that's all money. So why would we even start this? Why would we even start with trees, planting a tree? Because it just sounds to me like you're just wanting to burn money. Or you're just wanting to put us on this pathway to burning money. So fuck you and your trees. Because, you know, that's the noise you'll often hear. And if you want to plant a tree, you won't be able to plant a fruit tree because the fruit falls on the sidewalk. And people step on it. It makes a mess. Or the food attracts vermin like squirrels and crows and whatnot. And we can't have that in our city. And so you can't plant fruit trees and you can't plant nut trees because the nuts, when you step on them, they're a trip hazard. And so you can plant a certain type of tree for your street trees, for your shade, that don't have fruits, don't have nuts, don't have food, don't have anything, are never a problem, really cheap, grow easily, don't need tending, you know, don't get big, don't have big branches, don't have a lot of leaves, because you got to clean up the leaves every fall. Money, 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 money. And so you want to plant a street tree, and they'll give you this list of trees you can plant. It'll be like 4 trees. You can plant a sycamore. You can plant a native oak. You can plant another thing. And it's like, well, none of this is food, and none of these get very big, and whatever. And they'll say, yeah, well, that's your list, because, you know, the thing you want to plant apples or whatever, you fucking hippie. You can't plant apples. You can't plant cherry trees, but there would be so nice. We'd have all this wonderful fruit. Yeah, and you have fucking people climbing up in the trees like chimps trying to get the apples, breaking their arms, breaking their legs, killing themselves when they fall, and suing the city because we had an apple tree. No, you can't have an apple tree. You can have a sycamore. How many sycamores do you want? And they can't be too close together. No, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And planting a tree doesn't help you control climate change. Planting a tree doesn't even remove CO2 from the atmosphere, because eventually the tree returns to the atmosphere. And that's why I have this picture up. And I should have said something about it before I got this far. I've done this. I've used this picture in other videos. I kind of like this picture because it's wrong. This picture's a lie. This is the picture you're taught in 5th grade. Trees remove CO2 from the atmosphere using a process called photosynthesis. They use photosynthesis and CO2 and water to collect energy from the sun. Okay, here's the sunlight up here. Sun. They don't really want the CO2. They want the sunlight. Energy. All life requires energy. Then they want you to think that when that tree dies, the carbon that tree collected goes deep, deep, deep into the soil and is lost for all time. Does not return to the atmosphere. It's buried, sequestered, it's a sink. But this is all wrong. None of this happens. For the most part, 99% of the tree, the leaves, the branches, the big branches, the trunk, all that stuff is a surface phenomenon. It's all right here. We're in the cow zone. And just like when the oak trees are dropping their acorns, the acorns don't drop 20 feet under the ground. The acorns don't even drop 1 foot on the ground. They're on the surface. And it's a struggle for the baby trees when the acorns sprout to even get established because they're on the surface. They're not in the ground at all, unless they fall in a gopher hole or a squirrel hole, which does happen, by the way. And the tree is kind of counting on that. Also, in terms of other forms of carbon, there's all this grass. And the cows are eating the grass, and then the cows are pooping out the cow manure, but it's all on the surface. It's not down here. Not down here. Dead organisms and waste products. You think the cow poop is making its way down here? Are you even serious? What kind of bullshit is this? This, people, is not a thing. This is not a thing. And this arrow doesn't exist. And this arrow, where the cow waste and the cow urine is going into the ground, that shit ain't real. That's not happening. No. Unless you take out a tractor, backhoe, and you dig a great big hole and drop that dead cow in it, and it's pretty far underground, it's not in the ground. A dead cow, a dead deer, a dead fox, a rabbit, they're on the surface. And what happens when they die? Well, then it all goes back into the atmosphere. The tree, the cow, the rabbit, the poops, the urine, all of it goes right back into the atmosphere, like within hours, within days. Some places are so hot, like the Amazon rainforest, that when a leaf falls from a tree, it gets to the ground, it lasts a day. And then it's devoured, and it's gone. And where's it go? Well, it goes into animals, it goes into fungi, which are also on the surface, and then a lot of it goes into the atmosphere, right there on the spot. 1 day, maybe 2. And the amount of carbon that's churning through the Amazon carbon cycle is huge, but it's mostly either in the atmosphere or in the biosphere. In fact, you can't call the biosphere a carbon sink, like the drain in your sink lets the water just go away. It's gone. And that's what they want you to think. These are carbon sinks. These are not carbon sinks. These are reservoirs. The atmosphere is a reservoir for carbon dioxide, for carbon. The biosphere, all of it, is a reservoir. It's a place where CO2 can exist for a while, where carbon can do some work, right? Animals grow up and then they die, but it's just a reservoir. Eventually, it exchanges back into the atmospheric reservoir, and it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's a cycle. It's called the carbon cycle. Cycle is right there in the name. It was telling you all along. It's a cycle. It's a circle. It goes around and around and around and around. And sometimes it's in the atmosphere, and sometimes it's in the biosphere, and then it goes back. It goes around and around and around. And they have this big virtuous circle of carbon going into the plants, and then going into this mysterious reservoir in the ground, and then going back on this. What the shit is this? Dead organisms and waste go into cars? Are you even kidding me? The whole chart is a fucking lie. This whole chart is intended. It was drawn to be misleading. Nothing that's in here is happening. Oh, look what they have over here. I love this one. Here's a tree. Here's a little tree with this mysterious arrow going up back into the atmosphere. They don't ever tell you about that. They don't even label this arrow. All the others are labeled except for this little mysterious little arrow over here. What is this mystery arrow? What is that? It's respiration, but it's not animal respiration like with the cows. It's floral respiration. Plants respire. They actually use the products they make during the day, and they eat them at night. A good part of photosynthesis is simply used at night when the plant doesn't have sunlight. It makes its own food. When we say that plants make their own food, plants, they make their own food from sunlight and carbon dioxide and water. They certainly do. And then they fucking eat it. And this little mysterious arrow over here that doesn't get a name is not emphasized. And even the tree is tiny, right? They're really trying to de-emphasize this. They're really trying to say, this really isn't happening. Don't worry about this over here. That's plants using their plant food to continue to be alive. It's called respiration, just like animals do. Yes, plants do photosynthesis, make their own food, and then they do respiration, and they fucking eat it. They didn't want you to know that. This is an error by omission. They're simply not telling you that plants are part of the carbon cycle. They are not sinks. They are not even, they're just part of a reservoir. And they use carbon and they release it back into the atmosphere, just like animals do. This over here transportation and factory emissions, this belongs to fossil fuels. Okay, this arrow right here, this is the big boogeyman. This is your problem. They're trying to say that factories and cars and emissions is equal parts animals and plants and equal parts fossil fuels. Lying sacks of shit. Lying sacks of shit. That's not how that works. Animal waste, plant waste, almost never make their way into your gas tank. Almost never. Now, they can raise corn and turn it into ethanol and add that to your gasoline to extend your gasoline and make your emissions a little bit cleaner. But that's growing corn. They have to deliberately grow the corn. And they took the land away from something else, a forest, a grassland, to grow corn. And then they plant the corn using fossil fuels. And they harvest the corn using fossil fuels. And they make the corn into ethanol using fossil fuels. And they irrigate the corn with water pumped hundreds of miles using fossil fuels. And the fertilizers and the pesticides is all fossil fuels. And so it's debatable. It's actually debatable whether deriving ethanol from corn, which is a plant, reduces CO2 in the atmosphere at all. It's completely debatable. And one of the reasons why they add ethanol to gasoline is because the gasoline burns cleaner and reduces pollution. They're not doing it to remove CO2 from the atmosphere because they have to use fossil fuels to make the ethanol. They're doing it to clean the air. And cleaning the air is fine. It's laudable. We have real health problems from pollution, from tailpipes and smokestacks. Cleaning the air from combustion products is a laudable thing to do. But it's not part of the carbon cycle. It's all fossil fuels, primarily. There's almost nothing that's in the ethanol that goes into your gas tank that is free of fossil fuels. Almost nothing. No part of it. So by the time I've modified this chart, it starts to make sense. And the lie they will tell you is that plants will remove CO2 from the carbon cycle, burying it deep in the ground as if it was coal and oil and natural gas. And that is absolute raging nonsense. Complete nonsense. That doesn't happen. But they'll tell you that, and they'll draw a picture, and they'll say, look, plants are our friends, and plants are going to save us from all of our excess CO2. When all this transportation and factory emissions, when it all puts all the CO2 into the atmosphere, and that's bad because, as we all know, it's mostly fossil fuel based, then we have the plants to remove it for us. All we have to do is plant more trees. Problem solved. And then they give you a way to do that. They provide the checkbox where you buy the plane ticket, so you can check the box, pay the extra $20, and feel great. Because they've already told you that this picture is how it works. And so the checkbox is simply reinforcing what they told you about the carbon cycle. That plants remove the CO2 from the atmosphere, and they remove it from the entire Earth dynamic system. That they bury it in the ground, and then it's gone. It's gone forever. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It's all bullshit. They made it up. It's not true. None of it's true. My modifications to this diagram are much, much closer to the truth. Go ahead, plant trees. It's fine. Please do. Street trees are good because it helps people to walk, and we need more walking. We need more shade for people to walk in. We all need to be walking. And you need a market in your community that you can walk to. And you need a school in your community that you and your children can walk to. And you need services like, the dentist and ornithologist, that's trees. Ophthalmologist, that's eyeglasses, right? You need all these services in your community in a walkable distance so you can walk there. And if you have a nice sidewalk and you have street trees and it's all nice and cool, then you can walk places and meet your neighbors, get some exercise, and feel great. And there's no checkbox required. You're just doing the right thing. And you're learning how to live without fossil fuels. Oh, and by the way, your community doesn't even require you to have fossil fuels to get to the things you need. And even better still, there's a farmer's market where you get your produce and your other food. And that maybe comes from a farm that's like 10 miles away. And they're using a truck to deliver the food, but at least it's not food being delivered from Mexico, Right? That's a problem. So you have your farmer's market, and it's a walkable distance. And you walk to your farmer's market under the nice canopy of trees that you and your community planted, and you're on your sidewalk, and you're walking, and you have your shopping bag on your elbow, and you go to the farmer's market, and you get the fresh food, and everyone's friendly. You meet your neighbors. You go home. You cook the fresh food, and no checkbox required. You don't have to check a checkbox. Please plant a tree in my name because I'm really fucking up today by buying this plane ticket. Please, 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 please make me feel better. Please, please, reinforce my lifestyle choices by planting a tree for me. You're not doing that. You're walking to the market and you're coming back with potatoes and produce and everything else you need to make your next meal. And hopefully the food at the market came a minimal distance on a truck. And the truck could be electric, and you could have some narrative that the electricity in the truck came from solar panels. And of course, all that stuff needs manufacturing to make the panels and make the truck and the electric motors. And of course, the rubber wheels are still based on fossil fuels, and most of the manufacturing is based on fossil fuels. And certainly the roads and the road maintenance is all fossil fuels. But at least you could tell yourself a story that the food is nearby. I didn't have to check a box for the food to be delivered to me today. And I walked there besides. Yes, we're still dependent on fossil fuels, even if everything I described works out perfectly well. And maybe the only way you can live your life without a checkbox somewhere to make yourself feel better is if you grow your own food in your backyard. And then there's no question. You want tomatoes for your salad tonight, you go in your backyard and there's a big cherry tomato plant, and you pick off a bunch of the tomatoes and you put them in the colander, you take them inside, you rinse them under the sink, and you put them on the salad. Well, you now know exactly where those tomatoes came from, and they didn't come from 10 miles away on an electric truck on asphalt roads. They came from your backyard. There you go. And you could grow the lettuce in your backyard, and you could grow peppers and everything else that you're going to eat. And maybe you've got rice, and maybe you've got flour, and you've got some other things that do have to come a distance. But if you live in the right part of the planet, like here in California, then it's not too far. We have rice fields 50 miles from here. Well, I don't know where the nearest wheat field is, but it's probably not too far. Could be really close. You could live without fossil fuels. You could have all your food, pretty much all your food. Maybe not a huge variety, maybe not mangoes and bananas, but you could have a lot of your food. That keeps body and soul together, growing nearby. And maybe somebody in your community is a beekeeper and there's honey, and maybe somebody in your community makes beer, and so now you have ale or whatever that you can drink when you feel like you have to have that. And maybe somewhere in your community there's a vineyard and someone's making wine. It's a local wine. Now maybe it's not really good, but hey, it's wine, works, right? And there's no carbon footprint, because no one had to travel to get the grapes or bring the grapes or process the grapes or bottle the grapes and move the bottles, and it was all local. It's all here in your community. We got all kinds of vintners around here, or where their grapes are, but we have huge grapes in the North Bay. Huge vineyards up there making really, really great wines, world-class wines. California wines come from the North Bay, not too far away. We could probably have grapes down here if we wanted them. Could we figure all this out? Could we live locally? Could we live without having to check a box every time we do something? Maybe. Possibly. Now, there's 1 million people living right here in San Jose. There's probably 2 million people living in the South Bay. Can we support 2 million people with backyard gardening? Well, we're going to have to find out. So I will probably come back to this topic periodically. I know I've talked about it before. I like pulling this diagram up since I discovered it recently. I used this diagram when I was berating Johann Rockstrom for spreading layers of manure. But given, his clientele, rich elites who want to be told a fairy tale about how they're not destroying the planet, he has to spread manure, to make those people feel okay about themselves. He was basically a living checkbox. They fuck up the world. They spend all their time fucking up the world, investing in bullshit, investing in oil wells and all this kind of stuff. And then they invite him in to talk to them and tell them that everything's going to be okay. We're just going to plant trees. Check. And that's what most of it is. It's coping right now. It's coping. everybody's coping. Oh, and right now, there's a Hurricane Helene coming ashore in Florida that has been spawned almost entirely by global heating. Not climate change. No, no, no. They're not getting climate change this afternoon. They're getting global heating. They're getting heat. They're getting energy. And this hurricane is spinning up right off of Florida. It was born just off of Cuba. It came nowhere. Came out of nowhere, right? They slapped a name on it and said, fuck me, we've got a hurricane. Where'd this shit come from? I don't know. I thought you were watching. It just spun up out of nowhere. It's right off of Florida already. It's going to be a Category 4. Who the fuck ordered this? All right, put a name on it. Now we got a hurricane. Tell everybody, 20-foot storm surge. You're all fucked. Get away. Run. Run to the mountains. Get inland. 72 hours from nothing to what the fuck is this? That's global heating. There's no checkbox for that. There's no checkbox. There's no getaway with like, oh, but I checked the checkbox when I bought my plane ticket, so I don't have to worry about the 20-foot storm surge. I don't have to worry about Hurricane Helene. I checked the checkbox when I bought my plane ticket. I am absolved of all guilt, and I'm not going to be murdered in a hurricane. You could say that. But physics doesn't give a shit if you checked a checkbox. Does physics care about you checking a checkbox? Does physics care if you planted a tree? If you and your kid went out in some field somewhere and stuck a seed in the ground, does physics care about that? Do you think physics even notices that? Of course not. We've created a system that probably is going to last 1,000,000 years. There's no tree that lasts that long. Wife is calling me. End the stream. Get out of this cycle of doom. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll be back. I'm always back. I never go.